Thank you, Jack, and welcome again. Can you hear me okay? And thanks to all of you for participating in a time-honored ritual of democracy, where citizens gather to hear and to understand what candidates are saying, what they're saying about the issues that are affecting our city, and where candidates who have taken the time and energy and effort and expense to file and campaign for office share their ideas for this community as they seek to become public servants for the citizens of Billings. It's time to meet the candidates, and I'm going to introduce them starting from your left, and please hold your applause until we've introduced all of them. On your left, Bill Cole, candidate for mayor. Next to him, Jeff Essman, candidate for mayor. Next to him, Charlie Smiley, candidate for Ward 1 City Council. Next to him, Mike Yakowicz, candidate for Ward 1 City Council. Then Roger Gravgard, candidate for Ward 2 City Council. And then Denise Joy, candidate for Ward 3 of City Council. Next, George Blackard, candidate for Ward 4. Next, Penny Ronning, candidate for Ward 4. Next, Sean Brown, candidate for Ward 5. And next, Dennis Ulvestad, candidate for Ward 5. Let's give them all a big hand. Before we start asking questions, it's helpful for us to review the process that we'll be using in this forum. First, all candidates will be asked to make introductory remarks about themselves, their backgrounds, their visions for the future, or whatever they would like in a 2-minute time frame. There is a timer, Jennifer Reeser, who will let you know when you have 15 seconds left on your time, and then when your time is up, she'll hold up a sign that says stop. Every question after the first, you'll have 1 minute to respond, so keep a close eye on the time. At the very end, at the end of the evening, at the end of the forum, you'll have a chance to make a 1-minute statement about why voters should choose you. We'll also have 2 lightning rounds during the forum where you will not stand or speak, but will indicate yes or no using the paddles. You'll be asked a question and you will raise the paddle showing either yes or no. We'll alternate the order of response so that no candidate goes first all the time and no candidate goes last every time. For example, on the first question, Mr. Cole will answer first, then Mr. Essman, Mr. Smiley, Mr. Yakowicz, Mr. Gravgard, Ms. Joy, Mr. Blackard, Ms. Ronning, Mr. Brown, and Mr. Ulvestad. Then, on the second round, we'll start with Mr. Ulvestad and go back that way. It's time to begin. And the first question, for which you may take 2 minutes to answer, is tell voters who you are, why you're running, your background, or anything else you feel is pertinent. We'll start with Mr. Cole.
Thanks, Chuck. I assume it's okay to stand.
Yes, please do.
Okay, take a look at the seat that you're sitting on, the red cushion, if it's light enough. I'll come back to that in a second. You know, our city is a lot like the Alberta Bair Theater. The ABT is the largest performing arts center and the best performing arts center within 500 miles. Billings is the largest city and the best city, I would say, within 500 miles. But back to your seat. If you look carefully, you'll see those seats are very tattered. The velour is missing off most of them. And if it's not, it's only because they were the worst ones that were replaced last year. You know, Billings also has some missing velour. We haven't developed a large private downtown building for 32 years since the Transwestern building. We haven't developed a large general use park since Castle Rock in the Heights 37 years ago when our population was half of what it is. Just like the ABT has to compete for your entertainment dollars, the city of Billings has to compete against Billings or against Bozeman, Boise, Bismarck for the young people that will be the people to fill the jobs and provide the tax base of the future. The problem is that we are not investing in our community. That's why we have those issues. You know, just like, and the problem is going to be that competition for those young people is going to get more and more severe. It's estimated that 10,000 people retire in the United States every year. Here in Billings, we're going to have to fill more than 30,000 jobs in the next 10 years. In order to attract those young people that are going to fill those jobs, we have to provide a vibrant, urban, exciting city, a true city that has the cultural resources and the recreational infrastructure that young people want today. That's my vision, and that's why I'm running.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Mr. Essman?
Good evening. Thanks, Mayor Tooley. My name is Jeff Essman, and I'm running for mayor because I would like to get to work on improving this city sooner rather than later, with a pragmatic approach, using the tools we have available already at our disposal. Billings is a great city of commerce and industry that's provided a good standard of living for the past 25 years. We can build on that foundation for the future. My leadership will focus on meeting the workforce training needs of our employers, current and potential, so they can continue to expand and innovate and provide our kids with good jobs. I don't believe Billings must have higher taxes. I do believe that Billings deserves fiscally responsible government. So how do we achieve our goals? Number one, we pace our growth and development so it fits within our means. Number two, we don't burden our residents with continual calls for new and higher taxes. And number three, as pointed out in last night's City Council meeting, we develop a shared vision for the future of Billings, one supported by the community at large, not just one small segment. Development of a community-wide vision will take listening, patience, and the abandonment of a top-down hierarchy approach to city government. I have a long record of success in achieving strategic goals in both business and politics faced with limited means. I will offer constructive leadership to Billings. I want our city to thrive so that our families can thrive. And I hope that's a goal we all share. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Essman. Mr. Smiley?
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you to the Chamber for this opportunity, and thank you all for coming. My name is Charlie Smiley. I am a field director for the Montana Wilderness Association. I work every day with folks of all stripes to help protect and enhance the public lands that we all love and enjoy here in Montana. And I'm one of the people that Mr. Cole mentioned in his remarks who actually moved back to this city a couple years ago to pursue this professional opportunity, but also because I am passionate about this place. I'm passionate about Billings, and I'm passionate about the Yellowstone Valley. And I'm running for City Council because I know for the Chamber to achieve its priorities, for Billings to advance as a regional hub and grow and recruit great talent and grow and recruit folks of my generation, that we need leadership on City Council and in city government that will stand up for the values that truly will make that happen. I think we need more leadership when it comes to funding for public safety. I think we need more principled leadership when it comes to equality for all of Billings citizens and embracing diversity in Billings, which is one of the first things that we need if we're going to advance as a dynamic urban center. And I'm running because, again, I'm passionate about this place, and I believe that Billings stands a chance to be one of the greatest cities in the country and in the world, but we need energy and innovation and leadership on the council that reflects that same innovation and energy that I see in the generation that is going to take over coming on. So I'm running to bring some of that energy to the city council, and I appreciate this opportunity again to be a part of the conversation for how to make Billings better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smiley. Mr. Yakowicz.
Good evening. My name is Mike Yakowicz. I'm running for Ward 1. I'm married to a wonderful lady named Yukiko, who's in the audience, and my anchor, and my daughter is with her. I have 4 boys and 1 girl, and 1 girl is worth 4 boys. We have 4 boys that are engineers or almost engineers, and my daughter is an educator. We've invested 30 years in Billings, and I love Billings. I see the cup is half full. A lot of things are happening in Billings already. And I want to continue because this is what I taught my children about serving your community, being a public servant. Being in city council is an honor to serve my constituents. And Ward 1 is fantastic. We have the south side, we have the north side, we all the way to Pioneer Park, and then all the way up to Hilltop and the Heights. And there's so many things that we've been able to accomplish over this, even the past 4 years. And it's a we, with Mayor Hannell and the council, working together with staff, working with our constituents, putting in drainage in Alkali Creek, taking care of traffic on Aronson, addressing and supporting neighborhood task forces that are on the south side, the north side, Pioneer Park. There's a lot of things that I want to continue to do to help our city grow and ensure to all of you who are my constituent, you are my #1 priority. I'm not running for mayor of the whole city. I'm wanting to take care of my priority as my constituents. And my 3 legs to my table, or 3 legs to my stool, is neighborhood safety. Making sure we have safety in our neighborhoods and making sure our fire and police are strong. Number 2 is infrastructure, getting lead pipes out of all of my ward. That's one of my #1 goals that I pledged to Mr. Moyer, who is with the Pioneer Park Task Force. And we want to make this a great city by also taking care of our urban parks and trails and making it a place that is safe for our children and for all families. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Yakowicz. Mr. Grafgard.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Tooley. Thanks to the Chamber and the Billings Cultural Partners for sponsoring this, and thank you to you sitting in the audience for taking the time to come and become informed and having an interest in what's going on in your community. I'm running for a council position in Ward 2. It's primarily in the Heights. My wife was one of the best and brightest that was recruited to Billings in the year of 2000. And fortunately, she invited me to come with. So I was maybe not the best and the brightest, but you got my wife, so that's a good thing that's a win for the city. We decided to settle in the Heights. We liked that area. I had researched the schools. We really were comfortable with the schools for our daughter, and then the trails. There's a lot of opportunities to spend time outdoors. I've got dogs. Our dogs like to get out and run. We've got lots of space up there in the area that we live where we can do that. We've got the dog park. We have all kinds of other areas. And so, I want to continue that development. I want to continue that growth. The street that I live on, Fantan, when we moved in, the street ended at our back fence. And that was in 2000. 3 months after we moved in, the barricade came down, and we saw amazing growth up in that area by Skyview High School. We had it kind of nice when we had all that parking on the street and nobody came by, but it was part of the growth, and so we enjoy that. And my purpose that I really ran for is the issue of safety. And safety is a very broad topic. It's, trails. It's taking some of the pressure off of Main Street with the inner belt loop and the bypass, but conduct a managed plan for growth in our community.
Thank you, Mr. Grafgard. Ms. Joy.
Thank you very much. I started attending the city council meetings at the beginning of the year, and I just love our neighborhoods. Our neighborhoods are wonderful. I would like us to continue to have nice neighborhoods by having an opportunity for young families to move in, to have mortgages, to be able to send their children to the schools and have them ride their bicycles, and continue to invest in our established neighborhoods. One of the things I noticed is that our established neighborhoods don't get a lot of attention. There's a lot of attention to the new things, the things that are growing on the West End. They take our investment, and that's a wonderful thing. Not bad at all, but we also need to pay attention to those that are already established. There are houses in Ward 3 that have just recently been hooked to the sewer system. That's something that shouldn't be ignored. The taxpayers of Ward 3 have been paying their taxes, and they need attention too. So there are some places in Ward 3 that don't have pavement. That seems a little strange. As we invest more and more in growth, we need to make sure that those established neighborhoods continue to have the investment that they need to continue to have nice neighborhoods where children can go to school, where they feel safe, where they feel a part of the community. And that's very important. In order for that to happen, we need to think about, as our established neighborhoods age and those aged people move into retirement village or whatnot, we need to have those young families the opportunities that they need to have the mortgages and keep them nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Joy. Mr. Blackard.
There we go. Works. Thank you, Mr. Tooley. I appreciate you moderating this event. Thanks to the Chamber of Commerce for hosting this event. These are very important things in our community, and it's great to see all of you here, so thank you for being here. My name is George Blackard. I want to be on the City Council because I want to continue to serve our city. I've served our great nation in the military. I've served our veterans community on different boards, different committees, and different positions. And to me, life has no meaning without service to others. I mean, it's what you do, it's how much you participate in your community, state, and nation that makes life worth living. And you know, I woke up several years ago and decided that there's more to life than going to work and coming home. And this just continues that service to our community. I think we have a great community. We haven't gotten here by chance. We got here because of the great service to our community from former mayors, former city councils, and we're in a good position to continue to grow and become something even greater than we already are. But we have to be fiscally responsible with our money. I live on a budget. My wife and my 2 daughters are here. Thank you for being here, girls. And you know, we live within our means, and that's what we have to do in our city. If we want to get to those places and get those shiny things and those nice things, then that's going to take work and effort from everybody in the community. Everybody seems to give the city council a lot of credit for all these things they think they can do or think they should be able to do. But really, if we're going to attain those goals, it's going to take the work of the city council, the Chamber of Commerce, all the different civic organizations, and through that, then we can attain those goals. The city council has a pretty limited role and job description in what they can do. But if we all work together, then we can get to that vision that everyone has for our city.
Thank you, Mr. Blackard. Ms. Running.
Thank you, Chuck, and thanks everyone for being here. Thank you to the Chamber and the Billings Cultural Partners. I always say that I am the product of it takes a village to raise a child. I grew up here in Billings and went to Grand Avenue Elementary School, Lewis and Clark Junior High School, graduated from Billings West. Both of my parents worked when I was growing up. My dad owned a restaurant called the Happy Diner. So I would go down to the diner every day. It was my second home. So I was raised by generations of employees. I was raised by generations of customers. And when I left Billings and left Montana and came back, there are things that I saw in my community that I didn't remember from my childhood. There are things like a record number of kids in the foster care system. significant human trafficking, homeless children at record rates that are enrolled in School District 2. 2 years ago, we had 653 children that were identified by School District 2 as homeless. This past school year, we had 621. Those are numbers I think a community needs to be addressing and needs to be looking at. A city is building and roads, and those are things that we need to address, and those are things that we need to look at. But if we are concerned about the safety of our roads and plowing our roads, I hope that we will be equally concerned about the safety of the children in this community. So it's through that I wanted to serve on the City Council. I don't just preach change, I am a creator of change. I'm the co-founder of the Yellowstone County Area Human Trafficking Task Force. I am the founder of Operation Billings Child. I'm a CASA advocate, and I'm looking forward to serving on City Council to address other issues in the city that work toward the protection of all of you and the future of our city, our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ronning. Mr. Brown.
Sorry. Thank you, Chuck. As many of these forums that you're going to, you might as well be running as well. Thanks to everybody for coming. My name is Sean Brown. I'm running for re-election in Ward 5. I came here 37 years ago from Caldwell, Idaho, about 28 miles from Boise. And it's interesting, I hear a lot around here, you know, we kind of look at Boise as you know, something that we might want to model. I would hope we don't. I like Billings. Billings has been very good to me in my 37 years. I came here, dropped out of school, worked hard to find opportunities, but those opportunities were here. And you know, they're still here. But if we're going to keep our young kids here, if we're going to draw young folks here, we've got to start looking at how are we going to really draw businesses here? How do we entice them? You know, how do we kind of change our mode of thinking, I guess, to quit looking at running these big businesses out on a rail? You know, once you've vetted them and you've looked at them and they don't make sense, then sure, run them off. But you know, be welcoming, be open to it, invite them in, and hear what they have to say. Without that, folks, we're not going to have money to continue our trails. We're not going to have money to do the parks. We're not going to have the money to do these kinds of things. You know, we have a pretty definite amount of money that we can spend in the budget, and that's what it is. The only other way to do it is tax us all more. And, you know, I will tell you right now, I'm not a politician, don't want to be a politician. This is about as far as I ever plan to go. So that's kind of my look at things, guys, and that's it. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Brown. And Mr. Olvestad.
First, I'd like to thank Mr. Tooley, Chamber of Commerce, and also the Billings Cultural Centers. I've been here in Billings a long time. Even though I was born in Glasgow, Montana, I moved here. Well, my parents moved me here in Billings, Montana. I went to Grand Avenue School, McKinley School, Broadway School, and also as Penny, a proud graduate of Billings West. I knew back in the 60s there was such thing as a selective service number. And I found out what my number was. My number was 2. So I knew I was going to Vietnam. Eventually I made it to Vietnam, and I was assigned to as a radioman. I was the guy that sent the messages from the Gulf of Tonkin to the shores of Vietnam in the secret code. After I came from Vietnam, I moved back here, and on the GI Bill, I went to Glendive, Montana from Dawson Community College and received an associate in business administration. Eventually, I got a job in many security jobs here in Montana, especially here in Billings. And Billings is a great city. I have been fortunate enough to serve on many boards and commissions here in Billings, Montana, such as the West End Task Force Chair. Also, I was on the Animal Control Board, the co-chair, and currently I am serving on the Zoning Commission, make decisions. I believe that everyone in the city of Billings should get involved in local government because it is interesting and it is great. You get involved with other people. And what I'm passionate about is the people of Billings. We are known as the friendliest city, actually, in the United States. So I did get my associate. I've also, from Glendive, Montana, I was also elected vice president of Distributive Education Clubs of America. Back then it was called DECA. And I want to thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to serving you at my next step on my constituents in Ward 5, and I want to earn their trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Elvestad. And now we come to the first lightning round of questions. So locate your paddles, the ones that have green yes, red no, and answer these questions expeditiously. Have you attended a city council meeting since beginning your campaign? Thank you. Have you attended a city council meeting prior to your candidacy? Thank you. Have you read the city charter? Thank you. Is Sean Connery the best James Bond? It's a divided house, ladies and gentlemen. Now we go to the 1-minute answers. And we'll start on this end with Mr. Ulvestad. Billings' workforce is aging, and many of these workers will be retiring soon. We need to fill 32,500 positions in the next 10 years. Today's workforce generation tends to prioritize quality of place before actively seeking employment. What is the first thing you want the city to do to ensure Billings is a place people want to move to or move back to? Mr. Ulvestad.
Thank you. We would love to get our young people here, and I do have a suggestion. As I've said before, the most successful city in the United States is Durham, North Carolina. Why is it successful? Because they have attracted IT companies that would pay the younger person coming into Billings to make a living here, have a family. And also, we want to attract them because of what we have here. You know, we have Yellowstone Park, Glacier Park, Pompey's Pillar, and the battlefield just south of us. But most of all, what Montana to attract these people is, like I said before, is the IT people. And they says, well, what's in it for me? And what we have here is quality of life. I've been many places in the city, and I've been, when I was a Vietnam veteran, I've been in the other countries. But what we have in Montana here doesn't even compare. We have great parks and great trails, and quality of life is #1 priority for the people that we want to attract here.
Thank you, Mr. Ulvestad. Mr. Brown?
You know, again, obviously, we've got to bring good paying jobs here. We've got to create careers, not just jobs. You know, the parks, the trails, those types of things are obviously important. That's what people look for. That's where they want to live. You know, those types of things. Things are certainly changing from even my generation to the younger generation. What was important to me was, you know, absolutely a job. It identified who you were. Nowadays, that isn't the truth. So, you know, it's more about community. It's more about making sure that they have a lot of different opportunities open to them, you know, beyond just the trails and those types of things. But, you know, the arts, the fine dining, all of those kinds of things, small buildings, good growth. Those are the types of things that they're looking for, and that's what I would certainly support.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Ms. Ronning?
I understand on a personal level the answer to this question in how I felt moving back to Montana. I have a master's degree in business administration and undergraduate degree in film and went on to law school. And I too had struggled to find work in Montana. At one point I was the executive director of the Gallatin Performing Arts Center in Bozeman, and later went on to become the president of the Downtown Association in Livingston. And in both of those positions, we were challenged with this question: how do we develop communities where young people want to return to? And I would agree with what both of these gentlemen have said. The arts play a dominant role in that. I think we need to invest more in the arts, but I also think that we need to invest in the safety of the community. That as a woman, I can tell you that I want to know that I'm in a community that's safe. I want to know that the children that are in the community are safe. So I think it's a two-part answer to that question.
Thank you, Ms. Ronning. Mr. Blackard.
I think everybody on the City Council would like to see more job growth, more jobs. We have to work together, again, with people like the Chamber of Commerce that puts the best face forward and the best foot forward of Billings with our tourism industry, and get our name out there, show everybody. Everybody knows it's beautiful here. Everybody knows if you come to Montana, it's an outdoorsy type of place. But we also need to encourage our younger people, like our young veterans, to start up their own businesses, to become entrepreneurs, and encourage them to do that with the programs that are available to them. It's education. There's a lot of programs out there that will help people start new businesses. We need to put our best foot forward, show those people what those resources are, and help them along as much as we can. But it's all about education. Education, education, education. Let them know who's there to help them, where they're at, and what they can do for them, and do our best to spread that.
Thank you, Mr. Blackard. Ms. Joy.
I think we need to think of listening and respect. Unless we're going to be receptive to what these young people have and what they'd like to create in our community, then it's not going to work out. We have to listen and respect. Not only that, we need to be committed to what it is that we decide to do. We have many master plans in Billings. A lot of them have fallen by the wayside, never got accomplished. They just sit on a shelf having dust on them. Nobody's paying attention to them. So it's enough for us to listen and to respect and be receptive to what it is that people like to have done in the city so that we can have them stay here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Joy. Mr. Grabgard.
Well, the answer on how to attract the best and the brightest, I think, has a very simple answer. It's lifestyle. We have a fabulous lifestyle here in Billings. We have outdoors. I know when I lived in other parts of the state, when I lived in Glendive before, and this was before I was married, I could come down here and hang out with my uncle, and I could go skiing on Saturday, and I could golf on Sunday. It was just the best lifestyle that I had. And then even after I got married, the lifestyle was pretty good. But that's the key. When I was in Seattle and I had my kidney transplant, my nephrologist there had it narrowed down to where they were going to settle, to Seattle and Billings. And right away my question came up, well, why did you choose Seattle? And his answer was, my wife liked the water. Well, we've got Lake Elmo and the Yellowstone River, but that's hard to compete with. But lifestyle is definitely an asset that we have here in our community.
Thank you, Mr. Grabgard. Mr. Yakowicz.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you. Great question. So twofold. This is what fan the flames of success. We have a great mayor, have For the last 8 years, we've done a lot of neat things in our community. Zoot came to Billings here. American Airlines came to Billings. We got the great cultural center here. My daughter is here from Seattle. She's going to move back, I know it, because there's a lot here to do. So let's fan the flames of success. Secondly, though, let's develop more. Let's work with the unions when we need to develop apprenticeships programs. Let's work with the college to support Mr. Kennedy and his work in developing on both at Rocky Mountain College and MSU Billings, development of our colleges. Get our kids involved there more. A great statistic I just read, the Department of Labor, 75% of graduates from Montana stay in Montana. I think the cup is half full. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yakowicz. Mr. Smiley.
Thank you. We've heard a lot of great ideas so far, and it's tough in a format like this. I think a lot of times most of the good ideas get taken by the time you get to this end of the table. So I'm sorry, Bill, but you know what we need to attract young people to Billings is we need new leadership on the city council that's going to take young people's ideas seriously. One of the reasons that I'm running is a city council meeting I attended where a really great idea that would have brought affordable housing and art space to Billings was kind of shot down with open hostility by members of our city government. So I think we need new faces on city government. I think we need people who take the ideas and the energy and the innovation that young people are going to bring to this town seriously. And I think we need to stand up for the foundational principle of our democracy and acknowledge to everyone that everyone is equal and welcome in this city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smiley. Mr. Essman.
Thank you. I think our situation with attracting young people is not perhaps as dire as we think it might be. A recent workforce study that Basita and a number of partners undertook a survey of employers in our community. 351 out of 3,000 responded, and their report, and it's in that report, is that 3 times as many of those employers reported that they thought pay and benefits were the number 1 and number 3 issues in terms of their ability to attract and retain as community amenities. But I'm going to accept the premise, and I do have a specific idea for completing an amenity, because I think the city of Billings needs a win. We need something that we can point to as a positive accomplishment of what we can do going forward. And that is, we need to finish the connectivity of our trail system. And we can do that by bonding against our park funds and getting that job done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Essman. Mr. Cole.
Thanks, Jeff and Mayor Tooley. I guess I take a little issue with that. I think the question was looking forward 10 years. I don't think we have to look forward 10 years. The problem is already here. I think we have about 50 vacancies for physicians in town. St. John's has 80 vacancies. This is not a problem in the future. This is a problem that's here and now. It's just going to get worse because of our demographics. So it is critical. In order to solve the problem, though, we have to have a brand. We have to know what our town is. I'd one-up you, Mike. I don't think it's half full. I think it's 3/4 full. But I think we have to communicate that. We have to finish the rest of the glass, but we have to communicate that to tell people who we are and why that's an attractive place with great lifestyle. Bob Hamas of the One Big Sky was speaking today, and he's very encouraged. But the question was, where do you start? What's the first thing you would do? I would say the first thing is to have this conversation. We have accomplished a lot just through this process. For the first time, we're talking about some very real issues. And so that's what I would do. I would continue this conversation, which is very valuable.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Now for the next question, we'll be starting with Mr. Smiley and coming this way, and then coming around and ending up with Mr. Essman. What role, if any, do you see local government playing to support arts and culture in our community?
I think we need a local government that again, embraces opportunities for those creative and impassioned and industrious folks who are going to bring arts and creativity to this town. I think we need a local government that is going to support that and is going to welcome new ideas and new ways of doing business that will continue to foster that growth. I have a ton of creative and bright, brilliant friends in this community who are pursuing their passions, being creative in 100 different ways. But again, I think city government does not reflect those people, and I think that I am better equipped to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smiley. Mr. Yakowicz.
Thank you. You know, one thing I just have to acknowledge with our city, we are supporting Alberta Bair here with a new development. So that's a great example. City supporting tax increment financing to provide something like development here. But one key thing I believe is for City Council to stay involved and get involved. Recently, I was at a meeting at Western Heritage with the Alberta Bair representatives, the Yellowstone Arts Museum, and we had a great conversation. So what I would say is we, as City Council, we need to stay engaged, find out what are their needs, encourage them to invite council to their committees, to their meetings, find out exactly how can they leverage City Council. Often a lot of committees are on their own, but they never reach out to council. And likewise, as council, we should reach out to them. In that kind of communication, a lot of give and take action, a lot of great things can happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yakowicz. Mr. Gravgard.
What Mike said. They couldn't have said it better. Communication is key. You know, if there's something that the arts community needs, and the example is right here in this building. You know, I remember when this was built, and what a shining star it was. And, you know, we just assume as we go by it every day and we attend events here that it's still that wonderful, wonderful place. But there's some wear and tear. And so those TIF money that were allocated to make those kind of repairs to this building was crucial. And you know, communicate back and forth. If there's things that the arts community needs from the city, bring that forward. If there's things that the city needs from the arts community, have that conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Gravgard. Ms. Joy.
I think making it a priority would be the first thing to do. By making it a priority, we have to look at the process. If these communities wanted to use buildings downtown, how can we make that process easier for it to be implemented? A lot of things take so much time. There's a lot of bureaucracy involved. And if it's not a priority, then we're not really making it happen. It can be there, people can talk about it, they want it to happen, but do we make it a priority? Do we make it easy enough? Are we looking at the regulations, or what do they need in order to take an old building and turn it into an art center? What does that take? Is that going to take a lot of money because the process is very slow? We need to look at those things by making it a priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Joy. Mr. Blackheart.
Can you give me that question again? I just want to make sure that
Certainly.
I haven't lost my focus.
What role, if any, do you see local government playing to support arts and culture in our community?
Arts and culture. I thought it said parks earlier. Arts and culture. Just like they mentioned, very recently the City Council voted to give some money to Alberta Bair for this huge project that they have here, and that's one of the ways that we can do that. But this is a city-owned building, and we should support that because we own this. Anytime that there's a need like that, I think they should come to the city. I think they should tell us what it is, and the City Council should consider that and consider ways that either they can do it or they can rally other groups, other civic organizations to help out, because that's the way you get it done. It takes a little bit from everybody to make those things happen.
Thank you, Mr. Blackheart. Ms. Ronning.
I think first and foremost, city leadership needs to acknowledge the arts as valid business. not just as something luxury, not just as a bunch of beatniks, but as solid business. People make their living in the arts. This is just as much of a gift as someone who becomes a doctor or an attorney. An artist is a valid business profession. You just take a look at the PowerPoint slide here. That's something that an artist put together. That's a design. Design is in every aspect of our lives. So I think first and foremost, city leadership needs to acknowledge the arts community as valid business participants in our community. Like Charlie said, I'm a big supporter of Art Space. It's been a tremendous resource in all of the communities in which it is and has been built, and I would like to see that happen here in Billings. But I would like to see more of our community invest in the arts in Billings.
Thank you, Ms. Running. Mr. Brown.
You know, the city council that I've been working with, I can tell you, values the arts. I think there have been some comments that may have been taken out of context. There are those types of things. But I don't think that anybody is opposed to the arts and culture and things like that in Billings. In fact, it is what makes Billings Billings, just flat out. Absolutely support, but that doesn't always mean money. There's other ways to support growth in the arts. There's other ways to do that. Supporting the groups that are already involved in it. You know, the farmers market, you know, I go down there occasionally and it's amazing. We got people doing the jiggeradoo thing, whatever the heck that is. They're playing guitars. I mean, it's fantastic. You know, we've got a great art museum. We've got museums. We've got all of those things. And I you know, support is not necessarily we just throw money at things. So that's my take.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Ulvestad.
Thank you. I want to reiterate what Councilman Yakowicz said about being engaged. If you get engaged with your constituents and tell them, you know, we do have a great cultural center here, as my fellow candidates, you know, what we do have, the Babcock, we have the Alberta Bair, well, eventually the Babcock. We also have the depot, you know, for weddings down there, and also the Yellowstone Museum up here and Yellowstone Kelly. And that is very, very important to have a cultural city, because what I see here, I've been to other places. I've been to Denver, I've been to Seattle, and we have just as much as if we were out there. So I do support anything that supports our arts here. Another one is the Art Walk. There's a lot of people that come here to the Art Walk. And what we want to do, tell your constituents of Boulders, we want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ulvestad. Mr. Cole.
Chuck, I'd suggest three things. First is to cultivate an appreciation for aesthetics and acknowledge that aesthetics in our community matter. Whether we're talking about a building construction in the entryways, or wherever building a public building, what it looks like is just as important as how it functions. So we're honest, you know, we're Montanans. We hate to say that, but it's true. Second, I think we need to be talking about public support for public art on the streets. A lot of cities do that. It doesn't mean we have a lot of money to put into it, but we at least need to have the conversation. Third, you know, where it really hits the road is direct subsidy for organizations. When I was president of the Alberta Bair, I lobbied for the unsuccessful Cultural Partners mill levy. That didn't happen. I still think that most of the support for the arts needs to be private. It's going to be a very limited role when the government is going to make any sort of direct subsidies, but perhaps for shared capital projects like the ABT and the Babcock that are very popular throughout, you know, there's still a very powerful role for government there.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Mr. Essman.
Thank you. You know, the arts and culture play an important role in enriching our lives. Sherry and I attended a performance at Billings Studio Theater on Sunday. There was an outstanding young gal, Zoe Fries from Central High, that just gave an outstanding performance. And our community needs to foster young talent by supporting those efforts. I think it was interesting that the ladies pointed out that the arts face the same problems as small businesses when it comes to, overburdensome and perhaps overzealous regulation. It costs money, it delays things, and that harms a small business, it harms the arts. And I'm going to have a Willard Fraser moment here. I think the most vibrant 3 or 4 blocks in terms of our dinner and entertainment scene is the 23 to 2600 blocks of Montana Avenue. I think we need to look forward to perhaps closing that street, turning that railroad district into arts, entertainment, history. That old depot could be put to a lot of uses and encourage people to stay a day when they come here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Esmond. For the next question, we'll begin with Ms. Ronning, go to Mr. Blackard, and then continue in that direction, coming around and ending up with Mr. Brown. Boards and commissions serve in an advisory role in local government. Should an Arts and Culture Commission be created to offer perspective and expertise to the City Council? Why or why not?
I think you can guess my answer. Yes, absolutely. And I'll just go back to say, because the arts are as valid as any other type of business. And I think artists often offer a unique perspective. We think out of the box. For those of you that don't know, and if I hadn't mentioned, I am a photographer and filmmaker by profession. So we think out of the box. We think of solutions in visual images, in audio images, not necessarily on black and white paper. So I think the artists offer unique perspectives, and I think it's absolutely that's something that should be done 10 years ago.
Thank you, Ms. Running. Mr. Blackard.
Anytime that you can have a board that can advise you, bring you information. I mean, that's what it's all about, is information. The City Council has a lot of stuff on their plate, and if they can have somebody that can bring that pertinent information to them, let them know what it is in a direct and succinct manner, that's a huge help to the council. The council really doesn't have time to do everything themselves, so anytime we can have another board or council that can help support them and let them know what they need to make good decisions, then I think that's a good thing.
Thank you, Mr. Blackard. Ms. Joy.
Thank you. I think, yes, that's a very good idea, but more important than that, the City Council has to actually listen to the board. It can't just undervalue the work it does and ignore the fact that they make a recommendation and then we just sort of, well, maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't. If a board has worked hard, if they've done their homework, if they've worked and they've come up with a recommendation, then the City Council should listen to it. Let them work the details out, but let us listen to that and really honor their work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Joy. Mr. Gravgard.
I would be very open to a arts and cultural advisory board. As an artist, I can't even draw a picture of my name. And as an art aficionado, I am probably one step up from the dogs playing cards on velvet. So I would need some advising if I were to be on the council when it comes to the area of arts and culture.
Thank you, Mr. Gravgard. Mr. Yakowicz.
We have a few quasi-boards already that meet, and so it's a great idea to dovetail them into an official board for the city. We have 28 boards and commissions in our city. I go to most of them, or I've been to most of them, and it's true, we have to empower them and support them by council going to these boards, and maybe you can't do it all the time, but visiting these boards, listening to the boards, and being an advocate for them. So yes, if we do establish one as a council, we should listen to them and support them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yakowicz. Mr. Smiley.
Chuck, of course I'm in favor, and you know what really excites me about this idea is that it provides an opportunity for more of Billings' best and brightest and the folks who are at the forefront of Billings' best creative endeavors to have more of a voice in City Council. Again, I think that city leadership needs new faces and it needs new energy, and that's what excites me about that idea the most. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smiley. Mr. Essman.
Thank you, Mayor Tooley. I think the entire question of boards and commissions is overdue for examination. As Mike said, we do have 28 boards and commissions. Interestingly, the state of Montana is limited constitutionally to 20 departments. And every one of those boards and commissions takes staff time to support. And if we want to get this city moving, perhaps we need to take a good comprehensive look at, can we consolidate some of these functions, reduce the burden on staff time so we can get this city moving and moving now. I think in the context of that, the council can review what are our priorities and would a new commission like this need to be added. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Essman. Mr. Cole.
I think I share a little bit of Jeff's concern. 28 is a big number, and it does take staff time, and I don't think that we should rush into creating something like that unless the role of the commission or board were clearly defined. So I'm not sure exactly what that would be, but I can see some value. For example, the art space project, if there had been a board involved that could have fleshed out that project, and maybe still could in the future, they could help to educate the council, that could provide help to refine the ideas. Building projects for the city, having somebody from the arts community weigh in on the aesthetic value of those. With the airport coming up is going to be a very important $45 million expansion. Airports need to look good. We all travel through them, and we appreciate the importance of that. Noise ordinances before the council last night impact organizations that have performance space outside, advising on any sort of a mill levy. So I can see value. I'm just a little skeptical that the role would have to be clearly defined.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Mr. Ulvestad.
Thank you. I'm serving on the board right now, Zoning Commission. I do recommend that we do have boards and commissions, but I want to make one exception here, that we should use just the most boards and commissions that have the most activities, and the ones that we do not have any activity at all, which I know we do, we shouldn't have them. But overall, the boards and commissions is just advisory to the council, and I want to reiterate many times that our boards, the boards or commissions I've been on, the council has really listened, and I'm impressed with the council this year about the zoning and about the noise ordinance. As Mr. Cole has said, they do listen. They do listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ulvestad. Mr. Brown.
Yeah, I agree with the last three discussions here. We've got a lot of boards and commissions. They bring absolutely fantastic information back. They've done a lot of the legwork, but they are advisory. The council members are the ones that are getting the calls. The council members are the ones that get beat up if they go the wrong way. They're the ones, they're ultimately responsible for whatever the outcome is. Not the boards and commissions and all of that. So, we're hopefully listening to our constituents. We're hopefully, hearing more about things than a lot of the boards are. So when they bring in that information, you kind of dissect it, you tear it apart, you look at it, and you make your best decision. Certainly, I would support looking at an arts board for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. For our next question, we will call on Mr. Gravgard for the first answer, and then we go to Ms. Joy and come around this way and end up with Mr. Yakowicz. The One Big Sky Center project could bring substantial economic development to downtown Billings. Like most projects this size, there are many questions about it. What is the most important question you would like answered, and why? Mr. Grabgard.
Well, I attended the presentation today at the luncheon at the Red Lion. I've seen two of the three projects that were shown as examples firsthand, Lambeau Field and the Mayo Clinic surrounding area project that the group has worked on. There's still a lot of questions as far as funding. And that, again, it seems no matter what the question is, the answer is always money. And the one question that I'd like to see more information on is what exactly, how does the funding structure look? And we're not there yet.
Thank you, Mr. Grabgard. Ms. Joy.
Thank you. I would have a question about how that it would affect local businesses. Are local businesses going to have an opportunity to have spaces within that? And how would that work? I think it would be wonderful if local businesses were prioritized so they have a chance to use that space too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Joy. Mr. Blackheart.
I wish we had about 10 minutes to talk about that one. I have a lot of questions about that project, and on the City Council, I think that's the type of thing that I would bring to the council is ask those questions. Why, how, who, what, when, that sort of thing. I think right now it's money. Who's paying the money? This is private enterprise, and the taxpayers should not be paying for this.
Thank you, Mr. Blackheart. Ms. Ronning.
I've been watching the presentations that One Big Sky has been giving to the City Council, been DVRing it and watching it over and over. And I've been very impressed. As the executive director of the Gallatin Performing Arts Center, we were on almost $70 million project in Bozeman. So I had a lot of experience with working with the city and working with bringing a project like that to a community. And I see nothing but excitement about One Big Sky Center. I am a proponent of it. I know growing up in Billings where my dad had a restaurant, my dad's restaurant was absolutely a beneficiary of things that came to Metra, things that came to the Shrine Auditorium, things that came here to Alberta Bair Theater. So I see new investment in downtown and new investment in Billings as being something very positive. So I guess the question that I would like to have is, and would like to address, is not necessarily a financial one, but I would like to have more of an idea of what the developers saw in Billings personally and the excitement that they had for Billings. I would like to know that on a personal level.
Thank you, Ms. Ronning. Mr. Brown.
Thank you. This really goes back to a comment that I made earlier, kind of a mindset change. When these guys first came, now granted we've got hams involved now, kind of a different deal. But I mean, these guys came in and they were pretty much just pushed right back out. It was as soon as anybody heard TIF, it's like, get out of here. And now that we've got somebody in there that obviously is able to explain it better and look at things a little better, the mood is starting to change a little bit. The one thing that I really want to get out of this, good, bad, or ugly, whether it happens or not, is, to use their experience and everything else to do some of these studies that, we want to know. We want to know what would be the impact of something like that. What is the feasibility of doing something large scale? And that's kind of the information that they're going to bring back regardless. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Ulvestad.
Thank you. I was waffling about the One Big Sky for quite a bit, but then I looked around and I talked to businesses downtown here, and they're excited to have One Big Sky come in here. And I go back to the candidate said about the budget. We want to look at it. Do we want to go with TIF? Do we want to go out on bonding for this? And that's where the council has very tough decision. And I've been a native here most of my life, downtown here. And of course, the West End is going to build. They're of course going to build out west. And we can't go north, we can't go south. We're downtown. We're going east a little bit to the Metro. So I believe if the One Big Sky Center comes into town, going to create jobs, it's going to connect all the wards together. And I do definitely think we should look at the budget, and we go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olmstead. Mr. Cole.
One Big Sky Center, in my opinion, is the most exciting, most credible, large-scale project to come to Billings since 1991. I'm a real estate development lawyer, and I know the size of the barriers that are going to confront these developers who are looking to raise $130 million of outside dollars. We need momentum, not roadblocks. Doesn't mean we don't keep our eyes open, but we need to have a spirit of positivity. But the question is, what's the one question you have? And there I'd say is that public financial role. First, our degree of TIF financing. To what degree will the project itself pay for that TIF funding? Roughly $35 million is the numbers but thrown out. Those are not existing dollars of yours and mine. Those would be new dollars, public dollars, or new tax dollars generated by the project. Will the project cover that cost itself, or if not, to what degree? Second, to what extent will there be a need for any sort of long-term involvement for the public? We currently have to subsidize Metro, and it's some of the best money we spend. It brings tens of millions of dollars into our community every year. Not necessarily advocating the same size, but we need to keep our eyes open and make sure the numbers would justify any further involvement there.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Mr. Essman.
Thank you, Mayor Tooley. I've got one good question for One Big Sky Center, and that most important question is it going to require an ongoing subsidy for its operation? I think that's what the term long-term involvement for the public that Mr. Cole just referenced. I looked this afternoon at the Chamber study on a convention center, and 3 of the comparable convention centers that firm mentioned in the report required ongoing subsidies between $500,000 and $750,000 a year. Now, my personal opinion is that convention center is different than the Metro, and it's not open to the public. These conventions are not. They require hundreds of dollars to attend. If a subsidy is needed, there's a tool that can subsidize it. It's called a business improvement district. It's quite flexible. You can tax the retailers on the one floor in the area that'll benefit and not the offices upstairs. So there's a tool to subsidize it. I don't think the public should.
Thank you, Mr. Essman. Mr. Smiley.
Thank you. I'm excited about One Big Sky Center. As other folks have mentioned, it has the potential to be transformational for this community. One question I would have is, Bill has mentioned aesthetics a number of times, and as I mentioned in my opening comments, I think I'm really passionate about this place where we are, our landscape, our outdoor opportunities. And of course, Billings and Eastern Montana has always been an energy economy. So my question would be, how will this project that's going to be such a tremendous face of our community going forward for a new generation, for a new century, how will it reflect our need to transition to energy efficiency and renewable energy? I think those are things that we have a huge opportunity to embrace with a big project like this. And secondly, how are we going to balance out all this high-end real estate with affordable housing to make sure that Billings urban core remains affordable and diverse and vibrant in the way that we know it needs to be? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smiley. Mr. Yakowicz.
All 9 questions were excellent. So I have one more. Urban revitalization. My hope is, and looking from a 5,000 view at Ward 1, I would like to see the South Side energized, revitalized because of One Big Sky, the North Park being revitalized and energized, and Pioneer Park. So for me, my hope and my passion in the success of this project is it's a revitalization of our city, and especially downtown. And there's a lot of buildings that are vacant we know of. I'm hopeful, answering all these other questions, that we can have an amazing impact in the revitalization of this downtown, and that it will pour over to the south side and north side and Pioneer Park, and everyone will benefit from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yakowicz. And now we come to lightning round number 2. We have 5 questions, and we're not calling in any order. Just hold up your paddle, yes or no. Would you endorse a local option authority bill similar to those introduced during the 2017 session of the Montana Legislature? Thank you. Other major cities in Montana have passed ordinances protecting the rights of all citizens, including the LGBTQ community. Billings rejected such an ordinance. Should City Council reconsider the issue so we can present ourselves as a welcoming city for the talented young workforce we need to attract? Thank you. Would you support the use of tax increment finance money to build a parking garage and conference center as part of One Big Sky Center? Thank you. Some communities budget 1% of capital improvement project money to an art project that complements and enhances the site. Would you be in favor of passing a similar ordinance in Billings? 1% for art. Okay, thank you. The New England Patriots are a top contender to win the Super Bowl. Will they repeat? Okay, thank you very much. Now we go back to our 1-minute response questions. And this time we'll start with Ms. Joy, and then go to Mr. Gravgard, and then to Mr. Yakowicz, and all the way around until we end with Mr. Blackheart. Throughout the campaign, we've heard how important public safety is to voters. Specifically, what should City Council do to increase public safety? Ms. Joy.
Thank you for that question. I think it would really help if we really make a bigger project of our neighborhood watch. A lot of these little petty thefts that go on are because people don't close their garage door, they leave their windows unlocked. Ask my brother, he knows. Those are little tiny things that wouldn't take more police officers, but they would have people in neighborhoods empowered to really watch and be eyes and ears in their own neighborhoods. I think that we could raise the profile of that program and make it work better so that we have people who are thinking not only about their own property but their neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Joy. Mr. Gravgard.
Denise makes a great point, and you know, we used to have neighborhoods where you looked out for one another, and unfortunately I think we've had a tendency to kind of go away from that. And so you know, just doing a little self-policing, keeping an eye on what's going on in your neighborhood, and taking a look and making sure that your neighbor's property is safe. You know, we need to increase our police presence. Unfortunately, we're maxed out in terms of the budget, but for a city our size, we're woefully understaffed.
Thank you, Mr. Gravgard. Mr. Yakowicz.
Well, thank you. One thing for sure is that the city is working in different ways to address crime. So we have to ensure that our police force is up to speed. We just recently gave them more equipment to help with that. Another aspect is a park ranger, a police officer that the council approved of to cover parks. It's an increase in security and safety for our community. Education, we need to encourage neighborhood watch, being out there in the community, and I'm really an advocate of task forces. I have 6 task forces in my ward. I go to every one of them every month, and they are the leaders of my ward, those chairmen of those task forces. And they bring police in, the police give reports, the neighborhoods are energized and involved. These are a few ways that we can do to enhance our public safety.
Thank you, Mr. Yakowicz. Mr. Smiley.
I think we need leadership in city government and on city council that will not rest until we pass a new public safety mill so we can hire new police officers.
Thank you, Mr. Smiley. Mr. Essman.
The public safety is one thing that came up more frequently when I was talking to people on the street just about what their concerns were with the city than I anticipated when I started this race. We have a lot of neighbors, frankly, that aren't sleeping very well at night because they're listening for somebody breaking into their car sitting in front of their home on the street because they live in a small lot neighborhood. I think there are great things going on around the country in terms of the use of data. We need to, I hope, hire a new city administrator that's familiar with data analytics to see if we can change our staffing patterns to address some of that issue. But if we can't, I think our primary obligation is, in terms of a city, is to take care of our basics. Clean water, proper sewers, and a safe environment. That's what you need to have in order to have a city thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Essman. Mr. Cole.
I guess I interpret public safety as being a question of crime. I agree, it's very, very important. You got to do the essentials first. First things first, right? We are understaffed. We need to, in the police department, we need to look at hiring more cops. How to do that? With the 2-year reappraisal cycle from the 6-year, the city's funding is actually doing better. To the extent we have any extra money, we need to try to prioritize increasing our police force. We may be able to go back out for a public safety mill levy, but if we do, it can't be like the last one. The last one was intended to largely finance the general fund by creating extra dollars there. Any dollars that are created by a public safety mill levy needs to go into an increase in police protection. Second thing I'd like to look at is just seeing to what extent traffic cops can pay for themselves. We don't want to fund the city through speeding tickets, but the reality is we don't have a lot of traffic enforcement, but traffic police do generate funds. And if they can even cover half, 3/4 of their cost, that's money well spent. So we need to look into that fundamental question.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Mr. Olvestad.
Thank you. Looking at this, we are fully staffed, at 143 officers, but we're just fully staffed because of our city charter, our budget. What we need to do is change the city charter on the mill levies. We have to go up on that, and that will go out to the people. So as our city grows, we need our first responders, our public safety also to increase, because right now, other cities, the same population of us, have about 30 or 40 more officers. And as we grow, we're going to need to increase our mills on our public safety on our city charter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olvestad. Mr. Brown.
Thank you. It really comes down to, if we want to hire more officers, we've got to make more money. That's really what it comes down to. There's just not a bunch of money out there that's being expended on worthless things. Priorities are some of the parks, are the trails, are general fund type of things. We can stop all of that and hire more officers, hire more police or firemen and things like that. Whatever the community wants to do, but really you can't have it all without getting something. At this point, I think probably one of the biggest priorities for us would be to get out into the community, and why don't they want to pay more for public safety when they continually rate it the highest thing on their list? So what are we missing? We're missing something, and we've got to get out there and figure out what it is.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Ms. Ronning.
I am going to desperately try to get this in 1 minute. So as I said earlier, I'm not a preacher of change, I'm a creator of change. When I came back to Billings and saw that we had some serious issues in our community with our kids, and I would hope to God that a city leadership would think that children are at least more important than vehicles and petty theft. We have got to be focusing on the safety of our children, and that does mean we have to put more funding into the police. However, there are creative ways that we can work private-public partnerships. With the Yellowstone County Area Human Trafficking Task Force, which I'm going to thank Mike Yakowicz for serving on, he's the one of the chairs of our Prevention and Community Awareness Committee. What we did this past year in May is we held a 3-day conference. Stephanie Bacchus and I, who are the founders, I have 15 seconds. Stephanie Bacchus and I, who are the co-founders, we found funding to do a 3-day conference in which Chief St. John could send, with no expense to the city at all, 3 days of training. What we were also able to do is create cards that we distribute throughout the community. This shows on one side signs of trafficking, on the other side local numbers to call. We did that with no expense to the city at all. So there are creative ways, and the ways we need to do it is for the city council to become engaged with community members.
Thank you, Ms. Ronning. Mr. Blackard.
At any given time, there's 9 police officers on duty in Billings, 9 that cover the whole city. A few weeks ago, my daughters were involved in an injury automobile accident. It took over an hour for an officer to arrive, and he wasn't even the officer that was dispatched to that. He just happened to come by there. The true number is between 50 and 60 officers fewer than cities our size, average across the nation. So it's going to be a long time before we ever make up 50 to 60 officers. But what the city council needs to do is communicate to the community how bad the situation is. We have to be honest. We have a crime problem and a drug problem in Billings, and all these great visions we have for Billings downtown and all that aren't going to mean anything if it's not a safe place to go. So we need to have an honest conversation with the people in our community about why we need those officers. It's not just enough to say we need more police. We have to tell them why.
Thank you, Mr. Blackard. On our next question, we will start with Mr. Cole and we'll end with Mr. Ulvestad. It's been said that there are 4 pillars in a community: government, education, business, and culture. In your opinion, which is the most important and why?
Chuck, I'm now a politician, so they're all important. How do you start? It has to be a partnership. I'm looking for the private sector in there. I really am. I don't think government is. I'm not looking. Repeat the question for.
Certainly. Government, education, business, and culture. In your opinion, which is the most important and why?
Most important. I guess I believe in individualism. I believe in families, and I'm not seeing. I would question the premise of the question. The question. Culture, I guess. Culture, I would say, includes the family dynamic and the individual, and that's where it all starts. From culture, from those groups, you can build businesses, you can build education, you can build government, but it comes back to those individuals and those families, those small groups, and so that's how I guess I'd answer that question.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Mr. Essman.
Thank you, Mayor Tooley. I have got a definite opinion on that, and I think it's business. And the reason is that you've got to have business to A, provide the jobs, and B, pay the taxes. That it creates economic opportunity. Without economic activity, you won't have the money to support the government. You won't have the money to educate your children, and you won't have the money to either buy your ticket to go watch the cultural program or contribute to the art museum or theater of your choice. So I think the foundation is a healthy business sector.
Thank you, Mr. Essman. Mr. Smiley.
Well, I think that one of the great things about this forum and this election cycle is that there is a healthy diversity of opinions on what we can do to better our community, right? As far as the analogy and the question goes, if those four pillars were to be unequal, you probably wouldn't want to be under the roof that they are supporting, right? So, but what we all do care about is that our families are safe and that our community prospers. That requires you know, a healthy business environment, that requires strong culture, that requires the kind of education system that is going to make sure that we prosper in the long term. I think where I maybe differ from some other folks up here is that I don't think we can put the cart before the horse. We have a really amazing community here, but we have to find creative ways to invest in ourselves to make sure that all four of those quadrants are doing well for us to truly prosper. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smiley. Mr. Yakowicz.
Well, of course, all four. But I'm looking at my wife and I'm thinking of education. She has been a role model for my children, providing them great education. I have 2 valedictorians from our family, 4 boys that are Eagle Scouts, and a lot because of my wife and leading the way in education. The value of this school. When I've gone to schools, the #1 priority, I'd go to the teacher and say, you're more important. You're very important. And I really praise them and thank them. Education is important not only in the public or private school, but also in the colleges. And that's why I really feel we need to really empower Rocky and MSUB. I love this city. And they're much better than Bozeman and the Grizzlies, where I graduated from, you know. So you know, education, I think, is very vital. And it starts in the family, yes, but it continues on. And it can be secondary education. It can be at the college, technical college as well. So education.
Thank you, Mr. Yakowicz. Mr. Gravgard.
That's a very tough question. I remember hearing the great political pontificator Don King talking about you can have the nicest car, but if there ain't no gas, it's not going anywhere. So I would have to lean towards the same answer as Mr. Essman, business. Business drives the economic model. Business helps drive education. Business helps drive culture, and provides a source of the funding for a lot of those different areas. Business provides funds for the government to function. So although they're all very important, I would have to say that by a nose, I would have to lean towards business.
Thank you, Mr. Gravgard. Ms. Joy.
Since I work at Ben Steel, I think it's pretty obvious what I think is important. And that didn't start when I was an adult. That started when I was a young girl. And I walked around the neighborhood and people would say, could you watch my child for me while I can beans? Or could you help out with my child by babysitting? That's been my whole life. So education doesn't start at school, it starts at home. It starts with your parents. The example they set, the respect they teach you, and the critical thinking. That critical thinking also starts at home. Critical thinking has an absolute effect on all these 4 pillars. How we think about things, that's really important. It's not just what you learn at school, but the examples that are set by your community and by your family. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Joy. Mr. Blackard.
Wow, that's a tough question, but there's some good answers here. Obviously, business makes the world go round, and so many things are founded on that. It's not government, because we don't need more government. We don't need more government in our lives. We don't need government telling us what to do while taking money out of our wallet. It's not that. Education is a great one, and I think Denise brought up a great point. It starts at home, and it starts with our kids, and it starts with my daughters here tonight watching this thing, which may be boring them to death, I have no idea. But they're here, and they're participating, and they're learning. And so business is probably it, but education's right behind it, and it starts at a young age, and it starts with involvement.
And I think they're all important, but that's business is probably it by a nose.
Thank you, Mr. Blackheart. Ms. Ronning.
My mom began her government career in Washington, D.C., working for the FBI. She retired here in Billings from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, so she represents government in my family. My sister works for the Vancouver School District in Washington State. I am a product of the culture of Montana. I have a film degree from Montana State University. I owned an art gallery in Livingston. I'm a photographer by trade. I represent the culture in my family. My dad owned the Happy Diner, a business that's continuously listed as one of the top businesses that people miss in Montana and miss in Billings. So I'm going to ask all of you, who's the most important member of my family? I mean that. As a community, we are all of these things. In Billings, we are every one of these things. Every one of these needs a community to work. There is not one that is more important than the other.
Thank you, Ms. Ronning. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Honestly, probably one of the things that I really do agree with Benny on. You know, we have to have all of those. We really do. You know, business for me, it would be my choice. And I'll tell you, you know, that's a personal thing. Coming here as a school dropout, you know, without business opportunities, I wouldn't have gone to school. Without school, I would not have even known what culture was. And without culture and all of the rest, I certainly wouldn't have been interested in furthering my community. So, you know, that's kind of the way they go, but I absolutely agree. You can't really have any of them without all of them.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Olvestad.
Thank you. I don't have a business. I have an education and arts, but I really, truly, at the top of the list is business. Because without the businessmen here in Yellowstone County, here in Billings, we wouldn't have any jobs. We would have nothing at all. So and education is very important. So I would put my top priority is business for the growth of Billings.
Thank you, Mr. Olvestad. And now we come to the final question. And we'll start with Mr. Olvestad and end with Mr. Cole. 1 minute, respectfully. What differentiates you from your opponent? Why should voters choose you?
Thank you again. I believe I have the most experience. I've had many years of been on boards and commission, as I've said before, West End Task Force Chair, also Animal Control Board, right now serving on the Zoning Commission. And one thing what I would do going on City Council is earn my constituents' trust. There also, if we have different ideas, different concepts, which we eventually will have on the City Council, talk about that. Then if a constituent says, why did you vote that way? What my passion is, actually you actually go out to the voter and you speak to them face and face. You know, why you had a difference on the vote. And also another step is earn your trust from your constituents. That's number one priority. And I believe I've had the experience of being on boards and commissions, and I'm looking forward to my next step, which I believe I would qualify for my constituents in Ward 5 City Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olvestad. And now Mr. Brown.
Thank you. You know, first of all, I agree. I may not have the political and, you know, the politician experience behind me, and that's fine. You know, as a business owner, as a business manager for the past 20 years, you know, I've certainly got the experience of at looking at all sides of complex issues, knowing what questions to ask, when to ask them, when to finally give up and just say, I'm never going to understand it. You know, and working with budgets. You know, if you don't know how to work a budget, you're going to be out of business. That's just all there is to it. Not a lot of forgiveness. You know, so I guess my experience comes with, you know, really knowing what it takes to run budgets, what it takes to really dig into issues and solve those complex type of issues.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Ms. Ronning.
It's pretty clear I'm female. And, you know, it is clear. In 241 years, we've never had a female president. We've never even had 50% of female representation in Congress. In 135 years, Billings has never seen a female mayor. If Denise and I are elected, we will have a 100% increase of female representation on the city council. That's a significant difference between the two of us. But I'm going to share that one of the things that I have appreciated greatly about this campaign season is that we have had an extraordinarily respectful communication amongst all of us. And George and I were paid a great compliment today when we did a Gazette interview from Daryl Ehrlich that we get along very well, and we do. There are significant differences between George and I, just fundamentally. However, I want to focus on the things in the community that we do well together, and that's more important to me than what we do differently. So I also address George as my ballot companion versus my opponent.
Thank you, Ms. Ronning. Mr. Blackard.
Well, congratulations. Nobody else has asked us that question. I think what I can say about myself is that I believe I understand city government's role as defined by the charter and the way it's laid out and what their responsibilities are. And I think that people lose sight of that. They expect so much from our city government. I need help with this. I need you to do this. And you know, every one of us want to help people. That's why we're here. And we would love to be able to solve everyone's problems. But our job is to make sure you have safe streets, now plowed streets, fire protection, police protection, and that we take care of your money and we spend your money wisely. I'm not under any illusion that the job goes really beyond that. I mean, we're not supposed to intrude in your lives, but we're supposed to provide you with a safe city so that you can recreate in it, travel in it safely, get water, have sewer, and that's what our city council does.
Thank you, Mr. Blackard. Ms. Joy.
Thank you. I don't know Ms. Brown very well. I haven't met her very often, so I will just talk about myself. And so I have a bachelor's degree in political science, and I studied 2 years at graduate school in public administration and public policy. But whether this is a positive or a negative, politics runs through my blood. That's just the way I am. I'm an observer. I just enjoy politics. I don't like winning and losing. That's not what is important. What is important is that we find ways to move forward. And policy is the way we move forward. Whether it works, how do we tweak it? Whether we have funding for it, how do we find that? Those kinds of things are the blood and guts of city council. Sorry, that's not a very good analogy. Sorry, I'll think of something better in a minute. But, you know, it's what the city council has to do, to think about that funding. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Joy. Mr. Grabgard.
Heart and soul.
One of the reasons that I think that I would serve our community well is do some advice that my grandpa gave me many, many years ago. My grandpa was probably my best friend growing up. He was a tremendous role model for me. And he had a third grade education, but he was very, very wise far beyond his education. He told me that you have one mouth and two ears, and you should use them proportionately. I am engaged in our community. I am involved in our community. And I am aware of what people are thinking, what people are telling me, and I listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grabgard. Mr. Yakowicz.
I'm very grateful to be with Charlie. Very grateful for all of you for running. It's not easy. It's a lot of work, a lot of effort. And when you're elected, it's even a lot more work. I'm grateful to work with the mayor here. Mayor Hanel, I've been honored to work with you. And I wish you well in the future. And Councilman Sullivan, Councilman Clark, you know, it's been an honor to work with the citizens of Billings and my ward. And it's the greatest high, like today, I was doing door to door, and someone came out and said, "Thank you for plowing the alley." And she asked me a couple weeks ago to plow the alley. I said, "I didn't do it, but we did it." And I believe that is my commitment again to my ward. I will be out there giving my constituents #1 priority and addressing neighborhood safety, infrastructure, and urban parks, having them vital and safe. And I really feel that this city is 99% full. The cup is 99% full. But there's a lot more we can do. And so I'm very optimistic and I'm very hopeful about 4 more years. And I want to thank you all for your support.
Thank you, Mr. Yakowicz. Mr. Smiley.
Yeah, thank you, Chuck, and I want to thank the council again and everyone for coming, and thank Mike. It's been an honor to get to know Mike through this process and get to learn a lot about a lot of different things. But although I think Mike and I agree on a lot, and I think, again, a lot of us agree about the core values that we want to see enacted in this city and what prosperity might look like in Billings, I do think that I offer something different. I think I offer first of all, a new face, a new energy, new ideas for how we can tackle some of these problems. And I think I represent something that's not currently on the council, and that I'm a part of the generation that is the future of Billings. You know, there's a sense that that Billings is on the cusp of something, that Billings is having to think about its future and look forward. And I think that I'm the right candidate to help with that process. So thank you very much. And yeah, I hope I have your support and your vote on November 7th.
Thank you, Mr. Smiley. Mr. Essman.
Thank you, Mayor Tooley. Before I close, I do want to recognize my family, my wife, Sherry, my stepson, Cody, my stepdaughter, Jesse, my brother-in-law, and sister-in-law are here tonight. You know, that's what life in Billings is. It's rich. You know, I love this community. You know, I first served this community on the planning board with Bill almost 20 years ago now. We've engaged in this service because we love our community and wants what's best for it. I think I have a knack for getting things done. I don't think we need to wait for the legislature to act. I don't think we need to pass tax increases. I think we need to be strategic. I think we need to set our priorities, and I think we can move ahead with good planning and good leadership, and I appreciate your support.
Thank you, Mr. Essman. Mr. Cole.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to just, again, thank everybody for the opportunity to be here tonight. Thank you for you showing that you care about your community, for being here. You know, the question was, what differentiates you from your opponent? And I think the reality is that Jeff and I have a lot more that we agree on than we disagree on. We both want the very best for Billings. We both are lawyers and have a sort of analytical bent. We both like to get things done, and I think we're both fiscally responsible and prioritize public safety, all of which are very good things, I think. But there are differences. You know, I really do believe that this competition for young talent is what is going to drive our community in the future. And if we're going to have a sustainable, long-term, vibrant community that can compete, we really have to go there, and I really believe that. I also think that we can't just achieve that goal by doing more of what we've done in the past. I don't think that our existing resources are going to result in any different result than we've had in the past. So I believe we need to look for avenues to find those additional resources. And then lastly, I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I think I am able to lead that conversation in our community and to bring people together to achieve answers.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. We've come to the end of our scheduled time for this forum. I believe that any of the candidates would be willing to talk with any of you who are interested in approaching them out in the lobby afterwards. And I want to thank all of you for coming tonight, and God bless.